Ahoy! Whenever this topic comes up, there's usually a pretty hot debate about which one is better, so I've decided to add my 2 cents to it as well. The usual argument is that AMP increases normal damage and critical damage as well, so it's superior, but that isn't always true. Let me help you choose which one is better for you. Now, before we begin, a few things I'd like to note. For the sake of this example, we will ignore the resistances of the target and your penetration because right now those are not important. And also because nobody at this point actually knows how penetration exactly works except the developers. The second thing is, I will assume, hopefully correctly, that AMP, as its name suggests, amplifies your damage. Also a disclaimer, this video has lots of calculations in it and not much excitement, so if you're allergic to mathematics, stop watching. So to make it as simple as possible, let's assume you deal 1000 damage with a regular attack, while having 0% AMP and 0% critical damage. I know that's not actually possible, but bear with me. Now if you were to gain 100% skill amp, that would mean that it multiplies your normal damage with 1 plus the amp value, meaning 2000 damage. So 100% amp would mean double damage, 200% would mean 3000 damage, and so on. Let's also assume that you have 100% critical damage without any amp. That means the 1000 damage in case of critical is multiplied the same way as in the example of skill amp, so it would mean 2000 damage. And in the case of 200% critical damage it would mean 3000 damage. However, you will have to consider that amp is applied before critical damage is calculated. That means if you have 100% amp and 100% critical damage, the formula will look like this, meaning they will multiply one another as well, and that means a damage multiplier of 4, as I'm going to call it from now on. So the point is, if we assume that in higher dungeons you can't really kill anything without critical hits, you have to multiply your critical damage with your amp, and the higher the number, the better. So a few examples. Player A is a warrior with a balanced set and has 150% amp and 300% critical damage. Normally that's 10 times damage multiplier. Player B is a force archer who heavily relies on critical damage, especially with Art of Sniping, so he's got 100% amp and 400% critical damage, meaning 10. Player C is a blader who believes he must go full amp for increased BM2 damage, so he's got 200% amp and 200% critical damage, meaning 9. Let's assume they all have to choose between using a 30% amp elixir or a 50% critical damage elixir for the next dungeon run. Player A would get 180%/300% or 150/350. With amp, his damage multiplier is 11.2, with critical damage it's 11.25. Pretty close. Player B gets 130/400 or 100/450. With amp it's 11.5, with critical damage it's 11. Player C gets 230/200 or 200/250. With amp, that's 9.9, with critical damage that's 10.5. So I hope this demonstrates that there is no universal way to determine which is better. You always have to consider your existing values. Now let's delve deeper into the subject and consider the statistic effect of critical rate and the existence of normal damage up, which works the same way as critical damage but only applies to non-critical hits. The existence of normal damage up means we must use the amp multiplier and multiply it with normal damage up for normal hits or critical damage for critical hits. So let's say you've got the normal damage up rune with 10% bonus and like 10 more percent from earrings or some other source, just for the sake of the example. That means player A would have 150 amp, 20% normal damage up and 300 critical damage. In case of normal hits, that means 3 normal damage multiplier or NDM instead of the previous 2.5. In case of criticals, that's the same as before, so a critical damage multiplier or CDM of 10, because normal damage up does not affect critical hits. Now let's do a weighted average calculation using critical rate as the weight. Correct me if I'm wrong on this one, or anywhere else for that matter, the comments are always open for some debate. That goes as, well, it's easier for both of us if you just read it from the screen. So let's assume player A has 60% critical rate. That means 7.2 damage multiplier. So with the previous example, he drinks the AMP elixir and his AMP jumps from 150% to 180%. In that case, NDM will be 3.36 and CDM will be 11.2. With the same formula, that is 8.064. He drinks the critical elixir, so AMP remains 150, but CD jumps to 350. So NDM remains 3 and CDM jumps to 11.25. Again with the same formula, that means 7.95. So just to compare with the previous results, without considering normal damage and critical rate, his total damage multiplier was 11.2 with AMP and 11.25 with CD elixir, meaning he gains slightly more damage using a critical elixir. Considering those two stats, however, with a weighted average calculation it turns out his average damage will actually be slightly lower with the critical elixir. So to sum it all up, grab your AMP, normal damage up and CD and CR values and insert them into these formulas. To make your life a little bit easier, you can find an Excel worksheet for download in the description of the video that includes these formulas. That file is based on this video, so watch the whole thing before you start using it. And once again, for the sake of the example, and because we don't exactly know how defense works, nor know the defense values of enemies, all other offensive stats of your character and all the defensive stats of enemies are ignored. If you found this video helpful, please consider sharing it or subscribing to my channel. Ahoy!